No, I was not supposed to be an actor. By the way, I didn't know where I was going.
Some love stories don't end with a wedding. They end with silence, regret, and memories that refuse to fade. For decades, Alain Delon was known as the most irresistible man in European cinema, surrounded by beauty, fame, and countless romances. But after his death, one truth has become painfully clear. The woman who truly owned his heart was Romy Schneider. They met young, fell deeply in love, and spent nearly 5 to 6 intense years together, sharing dreams, fame, and a bond that felt unbreakable. Yet they never married. Life, ambition, and heartbreak pulled them apart, sending them down separate paths. Still, Romy remained the love Alain could never replace. This is not just a story of two stars. It's a story of a love that survived fame, separation, and even death. The most defining romance of Alain Delon's life was, without question, his love affair with Romy Schneider. Their connection would later feel legendary, but it began on far less romantic terms. When they first met at Orly Airport in 1958, Romy, already a celebrated star in Germany, was unimpressed. She found Delon self-assured to the point of arrogance, hardly the man she imagined falling for. Yet first impressions quickly dissolved once they began working together on their first film, Christine. On set, something shifted. The tension softened, sparks ignited, and what followed was an intense, consuming love neither could resist. Romy made a life-altering decision for that relationship, leaving West Germany to join Delon in Paris. By 1959, they were engaged, and for the next 5 years, they embodied the very image of youthful glamour, hailed as the golden couple of French cinema. Their faces were everywhere, their romance romanticized as a modern fairy tale. During those years, Romy's career soared. She broke free from her ingenue image, collaborating with artistic giants like Orson Welles on The Trial and expanding her horizons beyond the roles that first made her famous. But fairy tales rarely end gently. In 1963, the entire world they had built together collapsed with a single letter. Delon ended the relationship without warning, leaving Romy devastated. In an instant, the most luminous love of their lives became a memory, beautiful, painful, and impossible to forget. In a turn that shocked many, Alain Delon moved on almost immediately. He became engaged to French model Nathalie Delon, who was already expecting his child. The two married, welcomed a son, and briefly tried to build a conventional family life. That chapter, however, proved short-lived. Within a few years, the marriage ended in divorce, another reminder of how fleeting stability seemed in Delon's personal world. After her painful split from Delon, Romy Schneider sought distance and reinvention. She tested her luck in Hollywood, appearing alongside major stars such as Jack Lemmon and Peter Sellers, and even stepping into the playful chaos of What's New, Pussycat. The move felt less like ambition and more like escape, a way to outrun heartbreak by changing continents. Despite everything, Romy and Delon never truly disappeared from each other's lives. They remained emotionally connected and reunited professionally in films like La Piscine in 1968 and The Assassination of Trotsky in 1972. Watching them on screen again carried a quiet tenderness, as if the love they once shared had simply changed shape rather than vanished. In 1966, Romy married German director Harry Mayen, hoping for steadiness at last. The marriage eventually unraveled, ending in divorce in 1975, but her career continued to flourish throughout the 1970s, marked by increasingly powerful and mature performances in French cinema. Then tragedy struck with unbearable force. In 1981, Romy lost her 14-year-old son in a devastating accident. The loss cast a long shadow over her life, transforming a story once filled with glamour and romance into one defined by grief, resilience, and quiet sorrow. Just a year after the devastating loss of her son, Romy Schneider was found dead in her Paris apartment. She was only 43. Her life came to a quiet and abrupt end following cardiac failure after a recent kidney operation, closing the chapter on a life that seemed to carry far more sorrow than its brief span could bear. The weight of everything she had endured makes her passing feel especially cruel. Alain Delon was shattered by the news. In an act heavy with symbolism and grief, he arranged for Romy's son to be laid to rest in the same grave, a final gesture of unity after so much loss. After her death, Delon openly referred to Romy as the great love of his life, words that sealed their story as one of cinema's most haunting romances. From that moment on, her absence seemed ever-present. Every relationship that followed appeared more tangled, more troubled, as if Romy's memory lingered over his future loves. Their bond, cut short by fate, remained unforgettable, an enduring reminder of a love that never truly ended, only transformed into memory and longing. One of the most turbulent and unresolved chapters of Alain Delon's romantic life begins with Nico, the enigmatic German-born singer and actress later immortalized as part of the Velvet Underground. Nico claimed that Delon was the father of her son, Christian Aaron Boulogne, born in 1962. Delon consistently denied paternity, and the question was never legally settled. Yet for many, the physical resemblance between father and son only deepened the mystery, turning private doubt into public speculation. Christian spent his early years with his mother, but Nico's growing struggles with addiction made stability impossible. Eventually, Delon's own mother, Edith, and her second husband, Paul Boulogne, stepped in and legally adopted the boy. Christian took their surname, a quiet compromise that acknowledged responsibility without confirmation. As an adult, he made repeated attempts to be legally recognized by Delon, filing lawsuits decades apart, including efforts in 2001 and again in 2019. Each time, the courts ruled against him. Despite the distance, Christian later reconnected with Nico as a teenager and followed a similar artistic path, pursuing acting and appearing in several films, including The Inner Scar, alongside his mother. Tragically, he too became entangled in addiction, a struggle that mirrored Nico's own demons. His life ended in 2023 at the age of 60, adding another layer of sorrow to an already painful story. As this chapter unfolded, Delon's personal life only grew more complicated. In 1963, he met Francine Canovas, a young divorcee and model known professionally as Natalie Barthélemy. Yet even as that relationship took shape, Delon was simultaneously involved with actress Marissa Mell, both before and after announcing his engagement to Natalie. Love for Delon seemed rarely singular, often overlapping, and almost always shadowed by emotional fallout that lingered long after the romance itself had ended. On August 13, 1964, Alain Delon married Natalie Barthélemy, less from romantic certainty than from circumstance. Natalie was pregnant, and marriage seemed the expected step. After the wedding, she took his surname and became Natalie Delon. Their son, Anthony, arrived only weeks later, on September 30, 1964. On paper, it looked like the beginning of a settled life. In reality, nothing truly settled at all. Delon's involvement with actress Marissa Mell did not end with his wedding. The affair continued into 1965, quietly undermining the fragile foundation of his marriage. And Marissa was not the only ghost lingering in the background. There was also Dalida, the iconic pop singer whose presence in DeLonge's life stretched across decades. Rumors long suggested a brief romance when Dalida first came to Paris in the mid-1950s, followed by a secret reunion years later in Rome, even while DeLonge was married. Their connection later surfaced publicly in 1972 through the song Paroles, Paroles, where DeLonge played the role of a smooth-talking charmer. Years later, after Dalida's tragic death in 1987, DeLonge spoke with visible regret, acknowledging the depth of what they had shared. Yet no woman cast a longer shadow over his marriage than Romy Schneider. Natalie would later admit that DeLonge's love for Romy never truly faded. Even in marriage, his grief and longing were unmistakable, as if part of his heart had remained elsewhere. From the start, Natalie and Alain's union was turbulent. By 1969, after DeLonge became involved with one of his co-stars, Mireille Darc, the marriage collapsed, ending in divorce. Ironically, the relationship that began in scandal became his longest. DeLonge and Mireille Darc stayed together for an astonishing 15 years, a rarity in his life. Even after their romance ended, they remained deeply connected, maintaining a close friendship until she died in 2017. Their bond, though imperfect, carried a sense of loyalty missing from many of his other relationships. If anyone expected DeLonge to slow down after his divorce, they were mistaken. He quickly moved through a series of intense but short-lived relationships with actresses such as Anne Parelot, Lana Wood, and Catherine Blaney. Then, in 1987, he met Dutch model Rosalie van Bremen on the set of a music video for one of his songs. Despite a 31-year age difference, they built a family together, welcoming 2 children in 1990 and 1994. Once again, however, permanence proved elusive. The relationship ended in 2001. Through decades of passion, overlap, and heartbreak, DeLonge's love life remained restless and unresolved. Surrounded by devotion, yet haunted by absence, one question lingers quietly beneath it all. Did he ever find the love he was searching for, or did he lose her long before he realized what she truly meant? Alain Delon was born on November 8, 1935, in the quiet Paris suburb of Sceaux, into a modest working-class household. His early years were shaped less by comfort than by fracture. When he was just 4, his parents divorced, each quickly building new families of their own. Caught between households that never truly felt like home, Delon was sent to live with a foster family, an experience he would later describe as a wound that never healed. There, he grew up alongside the grim presence of a nearby prison, absorbing stories and sounds that left a lasting impression on his restless mind. After the death of his foster parents, Delon was passed back and forth between his mother and father, neither fully prepared nor willing to raise him. He was eventually placed in Catholic boarding schools, where loneliness hardened into rebellion. Gifted but volatile, he sang beautifully in the school choir, yet constantly clashed with authority. Expulsions followed one after another, fueled by fights, theft, and an uncontrollable temper. By his early teens, formal education had effectively ended. Sent to live with his mother and stepfather, a butcher, Delon was pushed toward a trade rather than his dreams. He trained as a charcutier and worked long days in delicatessens, earning a professional certificate but never a sense of belonging. Outside work, he drifted into nightlife, street fights, and trouble, gaining a reputation that worried those around him. Long before fame found him, Delon's youth was already marked by abandonment, defiance, and a quiet ache, one that would echo through the intensity and darkness of the man he later became. Facing the inevitability of military service, Alain Delon enlisted in the French Navy at just 17, hoping discipline might give his restless life some direction. After initial training, he was sent overseas to French Indochina as the war there neared its end. What followed was less a story of heroism than of hard lessons. Trouble found him easily, first through minor thefts, then through a reckless incident involving a stolen Jeep. The consequences were severe. He lost his radio license, received a dishonorable discharge, and spent his 20th birthday behind bars. Yet that turbulent period left a lasting mark. Amid punishment and isolation, Delon absorbed a strict sense of order, honor, and loyalty to France. He became fascinated with weapons and deeply affected by cinema, especially after seeing Jean Gabin on screen, an image of hardened masculinity that quietly reshaped his ambitions. Returning to France in 1956, Delon felt abandoned and chose not to reconnect with his parents. Alone and uncertain, he drifted through Paris, surviving on odd jobs as a market porter and cafe waiter. Nights pulled him into Pigalle and Montmartre, where he mixed with criminals, hustlers, and outcasts, drawn to their unspoken codes of loyalty and silence. For a time, his life teetered on the edge of danger and obscurity, far from stardom, and uncomfortably close to disappearing altogether. Alain Delon's career is one of the most striking in European cinema, defined by beauty, danger, and an intensity that felt almost untamed. When he emerged in the late 1950s, he didn't resemble the traditional leading men of the era. Instead, he carried a cold magnetism, handsome, silent, and unpredictable, that instantly set him apart. His breakthrough came with Purple Noon, 1960, where he portrayed the charming yet lethal Tom Ripley. The performance announced a new kind of screen anti-hero and turned Delon into an international sensation. He followed it with Rocco and His Brothers, 1960, delivering a deeply emotional portrayal that proved he was more than a striking face. In L'Eclisse, 1962, his restrained performance captured modern alienation, while The Leopard, 1963, placed him within grand historical cinema alongside legends like Burt Lancaster. Delon became the definitive figure of the stylish outlaw. Films such as Le Samouraï, 1967, cemented his image as the cool, solitary hitman. Minimal dialogue, precise movements, and an almost spiritual sense of honor. That role alone influenced decades of filmmakers and actors. He continued exploring morally complex characters in La Piscine, 1969, The Sicilian Clan, 1969, and Borsellino, 1970, often playing men caught between loyalty and betrayal.